The marble columns of the Metropolitan Museum's East Wing gleamed under crystal lighting as Alexander Kane commanded the room like an emperor surveying his domain. Tech moguls and pharmaceutical executives hung on his every word, their laughter perfectly timed to his jokes. In the corner, Rosa Delgado adjusted the floral arrangements with practiced invisibility, her weathered hands moving between the orchids with decades of experience. She had been Kane Pharmaceutical's head groundskeeper for 22 years, tending to the executive gardens and maintaining the pristine corporate campus that housed Alexander's billion-dollar empire. Tonight, she was helping cater his charity auction, another tax write-off disguised as philanthropy. Rosa reached for a drooping lily when her elbow caught the edge of a champagne flute. The crystal tumbler shattered against the marble floor, sending amber liquid splashing across Alexander's handcrafted Italian shoes. The room fell silent as every conversation died mid-sentence. Alexander's steel-gray eyes fixed on Rosa with the intensity of a predator. His voice sliced through the quiet like a blade. Animals belong in cages, not among civilized people, he sneered, his words carrying across the hushed gallery. Creatures like you should stick to digging in dirt where you belong. Nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd of pharmaceutical executives and venture capitalists. Women in designer gowns found sudden interest in their jewelry. Men studied the museum's artwork with newfound fascination. Rosa felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her expression neutral as she knelt to collect the glass fragments. 22 years of watching, listening, and being treated as furniture had taught her when to speak and when to observe. Tonight, she observed everything. The event coordinator's sharp voice cut through the tension. Maintenance to the East Wing. Fresh glassware needed immediately. The spell broke, and conversations gradually resumed. The wealthy guests returned to their discussions of clinical trials and patent acquisitions, the recent unpleasantness already fading from their carefully maintained reality. Rosa methodically cleaned the spilled champagne, her movements deliberate and thorough. Each surface received the same meticulous attention, regardless of what had transpired moments before. That was her way, professional, invisible, constant. Later that evening, Rosa was sanitizing Alexander's private office in the pharmaceutical complex when she noticed something odd. While wiping down his executive desk, her cloth snagged on a slight irregularity in the wood grain. A soft click echoed in the empty office as a hidden panel slid open, revealing a concealed compartment. Rosa's pulse quickened as a small hard drive tumbled onto the leather desk pad, labeled simply leverage. Beside it lay a stack of confidential documents bearing the letterheads of competing pharmaceutical companies and government regulatory agencies. Her eyes scanned the papers quickly. Clinical trial data showing dangerous side effects that had been suppressed. FDA approval documents with forged signatures. Emails discussing the elimination of whistleblowing scientists. Each page revealed another layer of Alexander's web of corruption. Rosa's hands trembled as she photographed each document with her phone, then carefully replaced everything in the hidden compartment. The panel clicked shut, leaving no trace of her discovery. By the time she reached her modest apartment in Queens, Rosa's mind was racing. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to her daughter Carmen, an investigative data analyst who had spent years fighting corporate malfeasance from within the system. Emergency. Need to see you tonight. Bring your laptop. Carmen arrived within an hour, her dark eyes immediately noting her mother's agitation. What's wrong, Mommy? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, Rosa said, settling into her small kitchen. I've seen the truth. She showed Carmen the photographs, watching her daughter's expression shift from confusion to horror to grim determination. This is massive, Carmen whispered, scrolling through image after image. These drugs caused organ failure, and he buried the data. People died, Mommy. Thousands of them. What can we do? Rosa asked, though she already knew the answer from the steel in her daughter's eyes. Carmen was already opening her laptop. We burned his empire to the ground. They worked through the night, Carmen's fingers flying across the keyboard as she built encrypted databases and secure communication channels. By dawn, they had a plan. The FDA is holding public hearings next week about Kane Pharmaceutical's new arthritis drug, Carmen explained, showing Rosa the government schedule. Alexander will be there personally to defend the approval. Maximum media coverage, perfect timing. But what if they trace this back to us? Rosa asked, thinking of the security cameras and Alexander's army of corporate lawyers. Carmen's smile was sharp with purpose. That's why we're setting up a cascade release. If anything happens to us, if we disappear or have accidents, everything gets published automatically to every major news outlet simultaneously. Rosa spent the next day maintaining the corporate gardens as usual, trimming hedges and watering flower beds while her mind catalogued every detail of Alexander's operation. She had learned to become invisible over 2 decades, moving through the pharmaceutical complex like a ghost, observing meetings through windows, overhearing phone calls, filing away information. That evening, Carmen showed her the digital fortress they had constructed. Encrypted servers in 3 countries, anonymous whistleblower platforms, direct lines to investigative journalists. We're ready. The morning of the FDA hearing, Rosa watched Alexander from the corporate parking lot as he climbed into his black Bentley, straightening his tie with supreme confidence. He believed his money and influence made him untouchable. He was wrong. At exactly 10:15 a.m., as Alexander began his presentation to the FDA panel, the first wave of documents hit the internet. Tax records showing elaborate schemes to hide pharmaceutical profits in overseas accounts. Internal memos detailing the systematic suppression of adverse drug reactions. Clinical trial data proving Alexander had known his arthritis medication caused liver damage in 30% of patients. Within minutes, the hearing room erupted in chaos. FDA officials huddled over tablets and smartphones as the evidence flooded their inboxes. News alerts began cascading across every major network. Rosa watched the live stream from her apartment as Alexander's confident expression crumbled. The same face that had twisted with disgust in the museum, that had smiled while degrading her in front of his peers, now showed something closer to panic. "Ladies and gentlemen," the FDA chairman announced, his voice cutting through the commotion, "this hearing is suspended pending immediate investigation of these allegations." The satisfaction Rosa felt wasn't quite joy. It was deeper than that, the weight of decades of silent observation finally finding its voice. By noon, Kane Pharmaceutical's stock had dropped 40%. Trading was halted as more documents emerged, each revelation more damning than the last. Carmen coordinated the releases with military precision, timing each bombshell for maximum impact. Patient advocacy groups are going public with their stories, Carmen reported, monitoring social media from her laptop. Families who lost loved ones to his drugs. "The dam is breaking, Mommy." Rosa's phone rang. The caller ID showed her supervisor at Kane Pharmaceuticals. "Rosa, you need to come in immediately. Mr. Kane wants to speak with all maintenance staff about a security issue." Rosa hung up without responding. She knew exactly what kind of security issue Alexander was investigating. Within hours, Alexander's legal team had issued a statement calling the evidence fabricated and naming Rosa as a disgruntled employee with access to office buildings. Security footage from the pharmaceutical complex showed her entering Alexander's office the night she discovered the hidden compartment. "They're painting you as mentally unstable," Carmen said, reading the corporate press release. "Standard playbook, discredit the whistleblower." But the evidence was too extensive, too detailed to dismiss. Carmen had cross-referenced every document with public records and regulatory filings, building an unassailable case of corporate fraud and cover-up. The FBI arrived at Kane Pharmaceuticals that afternoon with a fleet of black SUVs and federal warrants. Rosa watched the news coverage from her living room as agents carried boxes of seized documents from the building where she had worked for over 2 decades. Alexander emerged in handcuffs, his perfectly styled hair disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled from the arrest. He caught sight of a news camera and his mouth twisted with rage. "This is a witch hunt," he shouted. "Lies spread by disgruntled employees and opportunistic lawyers." But his protests rang hollow as Agent Maria Santos read the charges: conspiracy to defraud the FDA, criminal negligence resulting in death, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. The final blow came 3 days later when Carmen received a call from Dr. James Morrison, Kane Pharmaceutical's former head researcher who had been fired 2 years earlier for raising safety concerns. "I kept copies," he told them during a secured video call. Every study Alexander buried, every safety report he suppressed. "I've been waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to him." Dr. Morrison's evidence filled in the remaining gaps, providing direct testimony about Alexander's systematic corruption of the drug approval process. His signed affidavit detailed how Alexander had threatened scientists, bribed regulatory officials, and falsified clinical data for over a decade. The final tally was staggering: $1.8 billion in fraudulent drug sales, over 4,000 patients who had suffered serious adverse reactions, and at least 200 deaths that could have been prevented if Alexander had reported accurate safety data. Rosa stood in the courthouse steps as Alexander was led away for his arraignment, no longer the invisible groundskeeper but the whistleblower who had brought down a pharmaceutical empire built on lies and death. Carmen appeared beside her, smartphone in hand showing the news coverage. Victims' families are coming forward. Lawmakers are calling for pharmaceutical industry reform. "You did this, Mommy. You changed everything." Rosa watched Alexander's Bentley being towed from the courthouse parking lot, its vanity plates reading Kane 1 now looking pathetically small. His $1.8 billion pharmaceutical empire lay in ruins, his carefully constructed network of corruption exposed to the light. "Sometimes," Rosa said quietly, "the people they think don't matter are the ones watching closest." The rain began to fall as they walked away from the courthouse, washing the streets clean. Rosa pulled her jacket tighter and smiled, knowing that somewhere in those corporate gardens she had tended for 22 years, new growth would eventually emerge from the soil.